NERDSoul. Late Ill Kid at One Youngster holding it down, bringing that street geek and nerd soul. And we put together that hip hop with that geek. And today I'm with the one, the only, Dedren, representing SORGHUM SPEAR. What's up, man?
What's going on, man? How you feeling?
Not bad, not bad. It's good that you were able to come to LA. I got a chance to catch up with you. It was like super short notice.
No, it's pretty.
But I got a chance to check out the the website and the Kickstarter that you guys had going on, and I kind of fell down this hole of like this enchanted story of SORGHUM SPEAR. So for the people that don't know, what's SORGHUM SPEAR?
So SORGHUM SPEAR is a fantasy comic that we created that's based on a fantasy series that we did, old Dungeons and Dragons from my old college days. And basically what it is we turned into a fantasy series based on young women that gain abilities at a certain age, kind of a play off of like the mutants and X-Men and things like that. But what we wanted is like an African fantasy setting. So I'm a big Dungeons and Dragons nerd. And
so kind of just bringing that...
Right. So kind of bringing that aesthetic, bringing that history and lore that I always built into that world, but seeing something that was representative of how I grew up and the things that I wanted. So it became this great African fantasy series. And then from there, we kind of started drawing the characters out on the back of the character sheets and said, okay, well, maybe we'll put together a poster, and all of a sudden we had a comic book.
Now, the Kickstarter, you've already done that. It's been successful, which is great. I'm glad for everybody who supported it. And if you just found out about it, definitely check out their website in the link below. But now that you've gone through that, with so much world building going on, what's the next look for you guys for SORGHUM SPEAR?
That's a great question. I think the next look for us is we have to kind of build upon the foundation that we had. So this Kickstarter, as the prequel to the graphic novel that we'll have coming up, really was about that world building and kind of introducing it. And also for us as creatives, trying to sharpening steel with steel to make sure that we can actually make a product, have a deliverable, and then from there have something to build on. So the infrastructure is there. For us, next is just bigger and better. Yeah.
All right, now, as far as the artistry, because the art is so like, it's so ornate and very detailed, and everyone has their own kind of style and look. Who was the one that kind of like was like, all right, I'll draw this or I'll draw that, or she should look like this or she should look like that? Who kind of shepherded the character design, if you will?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the original character designs for a lot of things was Nedra Bailey. So she's a graphic designer out of Atlanta. Okay. So she did a lot of the ideation that worked with me when it was just kind of tabletop, right? Got with a friend of mine, Tim Gethers, who's a strong up-and-coming artist. Actually just kind of got some work with Marvel after our first Kickstarter. Cool. So me and him kind of always been at the comic book conventions together, kind of just as friends and kind of in passing. And eventually we made the book, but I think we really had a great turning point when we brought in Wellington Nomo, who's this amazing international artist. He's our cover artist. He really took our items and brought it to a level that I think at that point kind of got us the notoriety that the project's gotten. Yeah, because what I saw was a lot of that work because it was already from Kickstarter, ended, you have the website up, and it's just, even like the sketches, there's a lot of promise in this. And for the world, and I can't remember the name of it's what is it? The Onfree. Yes.
The Onfree. Yes. Get into that a little bit for me because I started reading and there's like this nice little I guess page of just like the world building and what's going on. But get into the Onfree for me because I want these people to know kind of like how deep this goes. You guys thought out a lot of stuff.
Right. So with that, I mean, and I think it's become so rich and decadent because we use a lot of authentic African history and heritage. So I feel like a lot of that, as myself just being a fan of history and also wanting to look at something that's authentic and had a good world base. The Onfree are based on the Dahomey Amazons of Africa. So a lot of that is very parallel to the Amazons of like DC lore. So with that, the Onfree are these Amazonian women who grew up in a warrior type society. But for them, the warrior society was one of peace and promise and kind of defending their way of life, not so much for war, but for them to kind of grow creatively and artistically. So they were kind of defending like a way of life. but at the same time, they're the protagonists of the world, which are the Bhikkhu demons, are there and kind of been offsetting that ever since they can remember. So that's why we call it the Forever War.
And that's where the shadows and everything come from. Cool,
right.
Cool. Now, I've looked at a couple of the characters I've read, and I wanted to know about 3 in general.
Okay.
First is the All-Mother.
Right.
Who is she?
Right. So the All-Mother is the goddess of the world. So we build the canon that the Eshe, the All-Mother, is the first woman of the world. And she has this device called the Life Seed. And it basically allows her to shape and mold reality. And so from there, she, as the All-Mother, created the unfree women as her children, her image, and created the Eternal Realm, which is this fantasy landscape, basically as a creator of that fantasy world.
Wow. See, guys, the lore is already out there. There's another character that I saw that kind of like piqued my interest, who is Satar.
Satari, yes.
Who is Satar? What's her deal?
So Satari is a very interesting character. So we also, although we're dealing with fantasy, I think we want to also deal with a lot of real world parallels and not world building, but also character building. So Satari is a half demon, and the Bhikkhu demons in this world are, I'm gonna say quote unquote, obviously are the bad people, and the Amphi are the good. So she's a mixture of both. So she's contracted what we call basically almost like a life code, you know, where she has demon-like properties because her blood has been poisoned.
Yes.
So over time, she's going to become a demon, and there's no cure. So what happened is she's an outcast of the society, but she has special abilities, and they need her to fight the war. So they kind of use people that are in this circumstance almost as indentured servants or slaves, basically. So her premise is that, you know, she's hated by the world she's trying to save. So she always has to look at it as, you know, she's fighting for people that won't back her when the war is over. So we use this as a juxtapose of like a lot of the African-American soldiers during World War II. You know, who are fighting, are trying to fight towards, you know, saving the world, but when they go back and they rotate back, the world is not treating them as heroes. So we kind of look at that, and there's a lot of social, and not necessarily political, but a lot of social commentary that we try to interact. Exactly. So that's kind of her motivation, is she has to figure out, is this world worth saving?
Great. All right, and the last one is Namazi.
Right.
Because she, especially, I believe there's an image with her and her sword is getting shined.
Right.
And she's like sitting on like this, I guess, smaller throne.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So now,
that intrigued me.
Okay. All right. So now that character is, let's see, Masako.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no worries. So that's Masako, the Linebreaker, and that's a side character on our series. Because likewise, we wanted to have an overarching. Now, Namazi as the main character definitely has a similar weapon called the Spear of Hope. But they are kind of enchanted weapons. We use a lot of that D20.
And I like that. I like the mixture of like kind of like the supernatural stuff and all that. All right, cool.
Oh, absolutely. So that character, Masako, is what's called a Linebreaker. So she's known as the Barbarian Queen. So she's the kind of the big bad that they send out to kind of take down the largest monster. So she has a squire named Sachiko, who's in that poster. Is her squire, and she aspires to be like Masako, like this larger than life entity. But the storyline is that they wish they could trade places. Like the young girl wants to be the Barbarian Queen, and the Barbarian Queen wants to be the young girl who is actually a great artist, but she doesn't practice her art. She wants to be a warrior. And so it's kind of that parallel of
throwing away your gift on both sides.
Right. So the storyline will be that Masako tells her the world needs more artists, not more barbarians. And that's kind of where they're both kind of pushing and learning from each other in a very kind of big sister, little sister. But when we see her in the book, she's all business, right? Yeah. So, but that's kind of as that storyline to get a chance to grow.
All right, cool. So Masako, we got her out of the way. Right. Now Namazi.
Right.
So what's the deal with Namazi?
So Namazi, when we meet, is a young farm girl. So in the prequel book, she doesn't have any abilities, but also her naivete comes from the fact that she lives a very sheltered life. So all the war and all the things that are going on outside of her village, it's never touched this village until now. So we kind of see her as a point of not only innocence, but also we get a lot of the storytelling and world building, because we're experiencing it just as Namazi does through her eyes.
Okay.
So the first time she sees a big city is the same time, first time that we get a chance to see it.
Okay.
But her idea of family and sense of fate versus choice is what we look at, because very quickly in the story we realize she's destined for greater things, as most heroines are. But her point is does she have any control over it? Is this thing is this kind of preordained? And the people that she has,
something that you can't stop.
Right, and the people that she has to leave behind or unfortunately lose along the way, kind of she has to look to see, is this the journey that she wants to take, or can she change anything? So as she grows and becomes very powerful, she also has a great, like, very innocent, hopeful insight that is challenged a lot, because when dealing with war, you always, it's good and bad, and the good guy and you say good versus evil is not always as black and white as you say.
And places can change during war.
Right, and she's a great juxtaposed to like Sudanese child soldiers. So that's kind of what we use there, where war comes to your town and you don't know who's good, who's bad. Somebody, your adult tells you this. But you have to kind of get involved. But you're involved. So we use that, and that's a lot of the premise of SORGHUM SPEAR, and why we kind of use young women and young girls and adolescents as major points of the story, and how the axis of the good versus evil shifts in their eyes and throughout the larger storyscape. Wow. So that's kind of where we want to look at it. Though there's a lot of other, obviously, adult characters and other stories. It's that's definitely like a major point to it.
So this seems like there's a lot of emotion, a lot of parallels in here.
Right.
Plus the supernatural, which I'm definitely into, and some action.
Right.
Like,
so a lot of
I'm definitely into that, and it looks really cool. But also, setting this aside, I found out through a little Googling, link clicking, that you also have Greene County Creative.
Absolutely.
What's Greene County Creative?
So Greene County Creative is our imprint, where we're not only creating comic books, but also looking at social activism. Okay. So, like, for an example, with SORGHUM SPEAR, for the backers and people that support our books, we also have a social initiative. Like, for this example, for SORGHUM SPEAR, we're working with a not-for-profit called Project Have Hope. So part of the proceeds that we use to create this book goes back to support artists in Uganda, particularly women artists, who through art and entrepreneurship are able to sustain themselves.
Great.
So with that, and our backers kind of get some of that information, and we'll release a little bit more once we have all the fulfillment done. But it kind of gives us, through a creative lens and kind of having inclusive creative content, as what we're looking to not only promote, but also support outside of our own endeavors. So that's going to a Kickstarter, that's going to these conventions, and for up-and-coming artists, kind of giving them a platform as we build it, that as basically the rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah, okay. Now, back to SORGHUM SPEAR, there's so much, like, even, you put on, like, the picture of the actual, like, the wheat grain or the cereal grain or whatever, show the young lady that was picking it and everything. What does this project mean to you?
So for me, this project means it's growth, and I think it is that growth and development. Just like for sorghum, and the parallel to what we use sorghum is sorghum's originally from Africa. It's in so many things here in America, but it's spread throughout the world, and it's one of the most ancient and healthiest things on the planet. And it's in Latin culture, it's in Asian culture, but it originated from Africa. And for us to kind of look at ourselves as African Americans and as inclusive people, we're trying to look back at the diaspora as the great, just the greatest story never told. And so for us, SORGHUM SPEAR is even just a start of that. I mean, it's a journey for me to learn about a lot of different histories and heritages, but also putting, not only inclusive people in front of, like, on the page, but behind the page. Yeah. So for us, it's not only just creating comic books, but creating infrastructure, and being able to not only create, but sustain. And I think that's what we're looking at long term.
Cool. Well, man, thanks for your time. Real quick, is there anything that you could tell the viewers that are out there checking this out why they should pick up SORGHUM SPEAR?
So I think for SORGHUM SPEAR is we're looking to try to tell a story not only from ourselves as creatives or our characters, but we're trying to create a channel that's a voice not only for one person, but for many. So with that, I think the support of SORGHUM SPEAR, not only do we hope that you get a great project, but you're also creating the infrastructure that allows for other people that are trying to get into comics, get into animation, get into film, get into writing, and basically getting into having their voice heard and represented in the way that they would have it. That's the larger gain in supporting not only SORGHUM SPEAR, but Greene County Creative overall.
Cool. So for all the wonderful people at home, where can they find you online?
Thank you. Online, you can find us at sorghumanspear.com for this particular project.
Cool.
We're getting ready to relaunch Greene County Creative. It is on Facebook, at Instagram, and Twitter. We're at Greene Co-Create.
Okay.
And from there, that's where we're putting the newest information that we get ready for our relaunch for this and some other projects in the future.
Cool, cool. Well, guys, that's from Dedren himself. You got it. You got it here first.
Thank
you got
you.
to see some images. There's some links down below. But of course, holla at us. We're gonna holla at you down in them comments. Let's get talking about SORGHUM SPEAR. You've seen some images. You've done some reading. Are you excited for it? And I'm gonna do a review of the book very soon, probably next week. So before we bounce, this is us to you saying peace.
Peace, y'all. Thanks.